Great. Well, it looks like it's just after 12:15, so we should probably get started. Uh, Hopefully some other people will join in with us. So there we go. All right. So something I learned from Lucy West at a presentation I'd gone to of hers at one of the national conferences, either NCTM or NCSM. She had us just do some deep breaths. So I'm going to put up a meme in a moment with a nice saying, and I want you just to read that to yourself, and I want you to take 3 deep breaths as you do that. So I think we don't take enough time to calm ourselves and take in the moment. And so part of my presentation today, or actually the whole of my presentation today, is all about how do we do more with less? How can we get more mileage, work not quite as hard as teachers, because we all work so hard. And so that's the premise of my whole day. And I had been at a conference somewhere at someone's session, and someone said the phrase, "Oh, you have to milk it for the math." And so that stuck with me. And so I created this presentation. I had a different version I did a couple years ago at the Vermont Council of Teachers of Mathematics conference in preparation for presenting nationally. And then of course, COVID hit and I never got to do that. So I've been working on it and perfecting it for here. So that's exciting. If you don't know me, my name's TJ, and I live up in Burlington. I've worked in the Burlington and South Burlington school districts for many years, and for about the last 10 years now, I've been a full-time consultant. I do some work for the Agency of Education, running an EdCamp system for the MTSS system. I'm also a math coach as a consultant in the Loyal North District. I do a little bit of work for the Math Learning Center that publishes Bridges and Quality Teacher Development, which is Sue O'Connell. And I do more and more, I'm doing work for the All Learners Network. And so I'm an All Learners facilitator. The hashtag for the conference is there in light blue, and my Twitter account is there with a little bird. So if you're a Twitter person, please tweet and add the conference, add me, appreciate that. Follow me if you'd like. I'm so excited to say that I'm soon to be an author. One of the COVID projects I've been working on, or because of COVID, I had more time to work on, was this series that's coming out from Heinemann called Math by the Book. And it's going to be kindergarten through 5th grade. And I was one of the co-authors. You can see my name there on the book. It's like I had to ask permission to share this cover. I was co-author of the 3rd grade. And basically it's taking 10 really great children's literature titles and creating a bunch of math activities and lessons to go with it. So that's coming in 2021, not exactly sure when, probably late summer, if not after, but I'm really excited about that. So I had to share. To get a copy of my presentation, because I know I go crazy trying to take notes when someone's presenting, you can hold up a camera from an iPad or a phone and just snap that QR code. It will download a PDF. Or you can go to that link, and I think Isaac dropped it in the chat as well. Thank you, Isaac. And that'll bring you a PDF copy of this. So I don't want you feeling like you have to feverishly take notes as I talk. For all learners, we have some professional agreements we use, and you've probably seen these already. And I'll just let you take a moment just to peruse them. I actually worked on these with Chris Farnham. And I just want to comment on number 3, which is appreciate that learning is a process, not an event, right? We're constantly trying to hone our craft, get better at what we do. I always say when I think back to myself 3 years ago, I'm like, how did I make it through the day? So be patient with yourself and allow yourself to be engaged in learning. So here's in a nutshell, the 5 steps I thought about to getting more out of less. We're going to talk about notice and wonder, and probably many of you have seen that or heard of that before. And then we're going to talk about removing the question. then focusing on the question, which kind of contradict each other. So that's interesting. And then I want to dive into thinking about a bunch of visuals, and I hope we have time to look at a video of myself with a third grade class. And lastly, I want to end with thinking about anticipating or anticipation. So notice and wonder. This came from the Math Forum, who used to be run by Annie Fetter. I'm not even sure if it's active anymore, but Annie Fetter, who there's a picture over there, and Max, and I can't say his last name, were the two who kind of started it and ran it for a long time. And the great thing about Annie is that she's actually from Vermont, and I met her at a national conference. And if you go to any national conferences, she's well known. She's a Notice and Wonder woman. She has stickers and shirts. But she's from Vermont, and she actually grew up about 10 minutes from me. So we were very kind of close to meeting when we were younger, but she's a few years older than me, so we didn't run in the same circles. But this is a routine or a habit that you can kind of bring into your practice, and you can use it in lots of different ways. So I'm going to kind of model it throughout the presentation today. So I want to start by having you look at this image and just think about, what do you notice and what do you wonder? And you could just pop some comments into the chat box, things you notice, things you wonder. Danielle's seeing some patterns. Danielle, could you type a little bit more about that? Like, what kind of patterns?
Sure.
Oh, Sherry's noticing there's some missing snails. Some students might wonder, like, where did they go? Did a bird get them? What happened to those snails? Someone's wondering why there's two colors. Ooh, someone noticed there's more pink snails than the dark bluish black ones. Great. And so with students, great, Danielle's seeing a 5, 4, 4, 5, 4. So if that continued, you might have another row of 4. Oh, so Sarah's starting to get mathematical. Now, if students don't go there with the math, I can then ask these questions, right? But with you all as a group, I didn't have to, because Sarah started just going to the math. So great, so Sarah's starting to think about mathematically a 5 by 5 array, and then some are missing. Or you could say 5 times 5 minus 3, right? Because there's 3 empty spaces. Does anybody else have any mathematical noticings about this image? I've heard in the past some people say, well, if you took 2 of the pink snails on the bottom right and moved them up, kind of imagine them filling, then you'd have a 4 by 5 full array. So it could be a 4 by 5 plus 2. Yeah, you could think about the rows that are full, or the colors. Oh, 2 antennas on each. So how many snails, but how many antenna? Great. No one noticed or wondered, or at least shared with us, this right here. Often this is one of the first places participants go when I share this image. Did anybody wonder? Oops, sorry about that. So basically, it's a snail parade. And this comes from Greg Tang's book. So there's a whole jingle that goes with it, and it's a snail parade. And so then you understand why they're all kind of headed in that same direction. So what I want you to do, I created a Padlet. So I'd like you to go here. And again, you can hold up your phone and get the QR code if that's easier, if you only have one monitor, or you can go to that link, or Isaac, I think, is gonna drop it into the chat there. And then I'd love you just to drop some ideas and thoughts about how does Notice and Wonder create accessibility? So having that practice of just noticing and wondering. I'm gonna scooch over here to the Padlet so we can all view and see. Yeah, so when you do notice and wonder, like everyone, right, does not matter if you're a student on an IEP, if you're a student who's English language learner, everyone can notice something about that last image. And you could notice and wonder with things with just numbers and numerals as well. So it does give that kind of entry point. Yeah, a chance for everyone to feel successful. Yeah, notice and wonder could be something you could do outside of math as well. It doesn't have to be mathematical. Or the notice of wonder that you have doesn't have to be related to math of the image. Absolutely. Yeah, thanks. Someone put the slowing down and not rushing to the answer, right? So that provides those students who just need more processing time to be able to enter into the conversation. Great, everyone can be successful. So Annie Feder, who is I see as the inventor of Notice and Wonder, or the mother of Wonder, Notice and Wonder, what presented at the Vermont conference that happened in October, and I got to go. And in a non-COVID world, she would never be able to present because she's so busy in the fall, and she has like sports team she's on down in the Philly area where she lives now, even though she still has a house up here. And so this is a quote that I took from her presentation at that VCTM conference. And basically what she said was like, you keep noticing wonder until you know what to do next. So it's not the teacher necessarily that you might have an ideal or a planned kind of path or way or goal for the discussion, but really that should come from the students. And so like with us, if someone, I think it was Sarah who put up the mathematical kind of wondering, if she hadn't done that, I might have asked that next question. But really you can kind of pull from the students. And to me, that makes it more, first of all, student-centered, but second of all, as a student, if someone's helping me guide my learning through something I've noticed or my friend has noticed, then I'm probably more engaged and invested in that learning as well. Because it's taking its cues from the students, and not necessarily, well, I don't really care where you're at. I need to get here because I have this unit to teach. So the next piece I want to talk about is removing the question. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with Dan Myers. And if you're not, Dan Myers used to be a high school teacher. I believe he lives in California. And he's also probably more so than Annie, even a big kind of nationally known math figure. He's been interviewed on, I think, ABC Good Morning America. He's done TED Talks. And this TED Talk that he talks about math classroom needs a makeover, which if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching and looking up. But he talks about more from a high school perspective, but it spoke to me at an elementary level, really, about how textbooks or maybe math programs or just math problems have paved this nice, smooth, straight path. And then we applaud students for kind of jumping over these small cracks, right? Because it gives you an example, and then it tells you, even he talks through this video, he says, and they're so helpful, like if you don't know what to do, it says, oh, see example, right? And then it gives you all the questions, it gives you all the information, and even sometimes provides an opportunity to put an answer somewhere with the unit in already. So it really doesn't challenge students. And he equated it to making impatient problem solvers because they're just spoon fed everything. And he talks about how to create more patient problem solvers, which kind of relates back to what someone was saying about notice and wonder, is it like slows things down a little bit, not to make things boring or slow, but to make sure everyone's on board. And it's not just those students who are fast processors that can be engaged. So the most effective way to do this, and you can do this literally with anything, is to just get rid of the question. So here's a task from OGAP. Fred ate 5/8 of a pizza. George ate 2/3 of the same size pizza. I've taken away the question. So I want to start with, what do you notice? What do you wonder? So pop some ideas in the chat there. Anything you notice or wonder about this task, this problem, this set of facts. I might not even call it a problem with students. Fran's saying they both ate pizza. Okay, great. Oh, Danielle's saying Fred ate more pizza. Come on, no one's wondering what type of pizza this is, right? That's the most important question. Is there pepperoni on that? If there's anchovies, I'm not going to eat it. Yeah, like that to me is so much more interesting than just a problem about pizza. When I start talking about and sharing what I like on pizza, um, yeah. Oh, Fran's noticing the difference, the same size pizzas cut into different size pieces. That's a really huge, huge piece to think about. So again, if I don't get what I need from the students, I could always kind of bring in this question, you know, or I could ask some mathematical thing, but then I want to ask students, what question do you think I'm going to ask? And what questions could one ask? So think about questions that could be asked of this. You probably all get what I'm going to ask or what the task wants to ask, but put in other questions that could be asked, just given that those two little pieces of information. So Sarah's thinking, who ate more pizza? Who ate less pizza? Is it less pizza or fewer pizza? I guess it's less. I had to really think long and hard about the difference between less and fewer. But that's interesting because like pizza, when it's not cut, you can't count it. But once it's cut, you can. Huh, I'll have to think about that. Oh, how many 12 slices could the pizza be cut into that yield these fractions? Love it. Look, so here we have some questions that can go really deep. So I'm going to reveal the actual question for this task. And with students, I would again cover that up, show that, get all my notice and wonder. I would chart all their questions. And now guess what? Oh, if you answered this question, and you've done a great job and you've shown your work and all of that, oh, guess what? We've generated a list of questions you can now go and answer. So I'm keeping those students engaged in the mathematics. They're not having to go read a book. They're not having to go do something else. I'm not having to generate something because the students have generated it. Let's look at as well. So I do a lot of work with the Bridges program, and I think it's a great program. It's not perfect, no program is, but this is such an easy thing to do as a teacher. I don't have to really think that hard or do a lot of preparation. So here's a problem from second grade in Unit 2, which is kind of October time of Bridges. And it's about apples and Nina. And I can read that. I can have students act it out. I can have them visualize. I can provide some pictures. But again, what do you notice and wonder? And then what questions do you think I'm going to ask here? Or what question could I ask? So I can reveal that. How many apples did she buy, right? But students are going to come up with many more interesting questions. So just think about here, like how many apples, does she have one apple for each year that she is old? Like that was an interesting question I thought of. Is that possible that she would have enough? I'll have to think about that. So lots of different ways you can kind of go really deep with that one problem. Now, of course, on this page that I took this picture from, there's, 10 other questions. And I'm less concerned with students doing every problem on the page than I am that they're able to really dig into one and show me they're thinking really well. So here's a fourth grade example. And if anyone teach Bridges out there, just a hand up, or anyone a Bridges person? Not seeing any. Okay. So if you're familiar with Bridges, though, you know Maggie's chickens. And so Maggie has 15 chickens. Each chicken lays 24 eggs a month. Boom, I just killed it there because I don't want to give away anymore. So again, with students, I'd have them turn and talk. What do you think? What do you notice and wonder? What question, again, could I ask? What question might I ask? And so I'm going to move on from that one. Yeah. There they are. How many eggs do Maggie's chickens lay in a month and all? But think about all the possibilities here. How many eggs would they lay in a year? How many eggs would they lay in 4 months and 3 months? I mean, there's a lot. There's just so many different places you can go. And I think you'll find if you do this as a habit, if you habitualize this and just make it a habit, daily or frequently, that your students will start surprising you with how they start really challenging themselves. I want to know how many eggs they'd lay in 10 years. They might get beyond the math that they're maybe capable of doing or you'd expect at that grade level, but they might really want to persevere because it's something they thought of. So then switching gears, instead of now kind of getting rid of the question to really open that up, what about if we focus on the question? And this I learned from Sue O'Connell, who's a wonderful educator and author of many great resources, including Math and Practice. And she lives down the Baltimore area, and I've gotten to be able to meet her and get to do some work with Sue. So in her Math and Practice series, which is a K-5 series, I believe, she talks about this thing called, and she calls it focus on the question. So here we go. We have some information that I could post maybe on a Monday, and this is about carnival rides. So in the chat box, I'd love you to put some questions that you think I might ask or that I could ask based on this set of information. And I really should have started with notice and wonder here. So you could also populate any noticings or wonderings. What ride costs the most? How many rides can I do with blank amount of tickets? Oh, Rick wants to know, he wants to ride all the rides, right? He's adventurous, so how many tickets would I need? Sherry wants to know, right? There's a great question Sherry posed. What ride should I go on the most if I have blank amount of tickets? So then it becomes more of an opinion piece, right? So there's really no right or wrong answer there. I think you should go on the Scrambler because it makes your belly tickle. I think you should go on this because it's like on bumper, like I would choose bumper cars because believe it or not, if you know me well, I love ramming into other people on those bumper cars and seeing their heads kind of snap back. That was really a lot of fun. It's probably not good for your neck though. Great, look at all these questions are awesome. For 2 people to go on each ride. So again, you can start making it much more complicated by adding some multiplicative. So if we're thinking this is a Monday, I could pose a problem like this, right? And this, I was thinking this would make sense as either like a launch or a number sense routine where I could do this every day for the week, or it could be a part of my menu where I have this information up. And so on Monday, I ask this question. And of course, I could take the question away and do all that stuff I do. And then on Tuesday, maybe I ask this question, right? But I'm not changing the information. The information is staying the same. So think about those students that struggle so much just to decode and make sense of a problem, right? They still have to do that with the question, but that information is staying the same. So they don't have to reinvent, they don't have to figure it out. They've already done that. And so, and then maybe on Wednesday, I'm asking this question. And then Thursday, I could ask another question. And then of course, Friday, I could either have a 5th different question, or I could then go back to all those questions you all developed when I first exposed you to the information and ask for some questions. And then it could be on Fridays, I ask students to choose you choose a question from our set of questions. Which one do you want to answer? So I love this idea from Sue about focusing on the question. And part of what she talks about this with as well is through those questions, and I cycled through them kind of fast, so you might not have seen it, but through those questions, she actually got at different types of problems. So when we think about the different types of addition and subtraction problems, or the different types of multiplication and division problems, you can actually get at those different problem types by asking different questions. So again, students aren't having to decode every time for the information, they're just really having to figure out what is it asking. And there's my Friday one if I was going to reveal a Friday, or it could be I reveal the Friday and then I ask you to do one of those questions that we had thought of prior. There it is. Great. So the next step, so there's 2 things, notice and wonder, 3 things. Get rid of the question before, and then and then focusing on the question. And then probably my most favorite thing to do is use visuals. I have really been playing around the last few years with using visuals, and I found that K2 materials, specifically K1 materials, are much better at incorporating and using visuals than are third and beyond. And even second grade a little bit. So I was getting ready for this talk a couple years ago, and I had a third grade teacher friend in South Burlington who allowed me to come in and do some work with her kiddos. And I said, can I just try out some stuff? And I made a bunch of stuff. And so one of the stories I told was about making cookies in your grandma or grandpa's house, or mother or father, grown up, whoever's at home, and imagine pulling out this sheet of cookies, and I flashed this image. And these are third graders. This was about October, so beginning of the year. And it was pretty cool. With this image in particular, we really got into, they saw the 6 groups of 6, and you can see on my screen there, they did some addition, they did some multiplication, but then we got really deep and we started thinking about 2 groups of 3 groups of 6. So right here, they saw the 2 groups of 3 groups of 6 on the top and the bottom. That thing's gonna keep fucking. And then they saw the 3 groups of 2 groups of 6. And I recorded it with the parentheses, and like, I had to be honest with them, like, this is beyond third grade content. Like, we don't expect third graders to do that, but they were able to kind of, I didn't truly understand it in that one moment, but I think they're beginning to understand the parentheses and how they're used. Was kind of the foundation was planted for that using this image. This is one I created. I just took icons or an image that I think I Googled online of cookie, and then I just repeated it over and over again, took a screenshot, and when I showed it to the students, I just kind of put it up and then took it down. And so the whole process is, what do you notice? What do you wonder? And then we started from that kind of getting into the math of it. And then I kind of did it as a little number talk where I was recording their thinking that they were sharing about the cookies. From there, and so again, I was doing this for my benefit for a presentation I was getting ready with. So I wouldn't necessarily do all these things I'm going to show you together in one, but I had limited time with these third graders. So this is another image I found, or I found online, this one already pre-made. And kind of one of the most interesting conversations we had was, what are those? Are they lemons, limes? So I did have to share with them, those are grapefruit. But what I was hoping would happen by showing this image was that something about fractions would come out. And so the third graders had an interesting kind of conversation about, they were saying it's half, it's 8 and 8. And when I asked how they knew, or when I think it was when I asked how they knew it was half, they said, well, 8 and 8 make 16, and there's 8 of each. So that was really interesting to me to see, like, even though it's not distinct 2 halves, they could still kind of play with that idea of half. And then the next one I showed was this one. And again, all of these I was putting up kind of just for a few seconds and then taking down because I didn't want them counting by ones. And so that idea of screening or flashing to force students to really see things in groups. So what I'd like you to do privately for a moment is just think about these beginning of year third graders a couple years ago. What do you think they noticed and wondered about these pretzels? And you can just pop an idea in the chat box when you have something. So Sherry's saying, how many small squares are there? Yeah. Noticing that they're square, lots of squares, right? A big square, each pretzel's a square, squares inside of them. Fran, I didn't hear that one. They have salt on them, but that's a great noticing. Yeah. So they noticed all these things, and we kind of, very quickly they saw the 3 by 3, and we knew it was 3 plus 3 plus 3, or 3 times 3. And then someone brought up the idea of those little squares, like Sherry did. And so that's kind of where we went with this one. It was All right, so you have this noticing. All right, so I'm gonna, I have a video of us, and I'm hoping the volume's gonna work okay. So this is about 4 minutes. This is third graders at Orchard School.
There's 9 pretzels. That's not a lot of debate.
Can everybody hear that okay?
We all agreed that there were 12 little squares inside each of the pretzels. And then someone was wondering, how many little squares are in this whole image? And I'm wondering, we could go and like, is there, like, even second graders or first graders can count them, right? But how could we do it as third graders? What would that look like as third graders? My friend back there, I'm a little, what were you thinking about that? How could we figure that out? What could we do mathematically? Do it 9 times, so I could do 12. Oops. Well, that's 12. Give me some feedback if you were also thinking like this, or that repeated addition. Gosh, did that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh gosh. That's a lot of 12. Any other ideas about this? Oh, where are you getting your 48s from?
Because 12 plus 12 is 24, and 24 is 12
Okay, if I heard you right, you said 4 groups of 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, would be 48, and another 4 groups of 12 would be 48, and then you have 1 more 12. Is that correct? Ah, that's an interesting way of breaking it down. Different way of thinking of it?
12 times
12
or 9 times.
Groups of 9, or more accurately, 9 groups of 12. And this friend said he thinks it's 96. 108, you changed your mind after you got that. And seeing agreeing with that, can we check that? Let's check 108. Let's use this friend's way. 48 plus 48 plus 12. How could we check it?
48 was 96.
So 2 groups of 48 is 96. Give some feedback if you agree with that.
Yeah. And then 10 was 9.
Can we just prove that? 8 and 8 is 16. 40 and 40 is 80. And another 10 is 90. And then we have 96 plus 12.
And then 9 plus 10 is 100. And then the 2 left over. 6 plus 8. I mean, 6 plus 2 is 8. And then 100 plus 8.
Do you guys want to know something? This right here is 4th grade level. You're not supposed to be able to do that or know that. That's pretty impressive. All right, I have one last image and we only have a couple minutes, but this one was a little different than the others, so I just threw it in there. Do you want to see that one before we go, or are you guys done? Give me some feedback. I want to do another one. All right, had enough. Okay, all right, you guys have the stamina, that's great. So we won't talk too much about this one, but maybe I'll just have you chat with friends and we'll have some parting thoughts. So what do you want?
So I just wanted to share the very end there because if you notice, they're a little antsy in the video. They had sat for a long time. They were real troopers because I was just trying to get information for my presentation. You know, of course I wanted them to learn, but this wasn't about really their learning at that point. Because I was like, if you're done, that's okay, because they were definitely getting antsy. But they were excited to see the next image because we were a little all over the place. So any thoughts about what you observed there? Did it confirm what you thought the third graders were thinking, or surprise you, or? You can either unmute or put something in the chat. Yeah, they had really great strategies. I mean, this is beginning of third grade, so I was really impressed with their thinking about these things and just where they went mathematically. It was kind of my hope, and part of my hypothesis is that the images really helped that, right? It kept them engaged, it kept them interested. And you can see, even though they're getting a little antsy and it's literally right before lunch, I was like, okay, you sure you want to see this next image? The next image I had was, not that one, was this one, was the cupcakes. And of course, you know, one of the noticing and wondering was the flavors. But again, they were able to talk about half their concepts around fractions, like, you know, half is full, but the other half was missing some. And so we didn't go super deep in mathematics here, but I did want to just kind of get some of their noticing and wonderings and see what they thought about that. And if they, you know, that line in that cupcake box, I love how it just visually separates it in half. And then could they see that half was full and half was kind of partially eaten. So all of these come from the website called NumberTalk Images. Well, not the cookies, I made those, but all the others. And this for a long time has been one of my favorite sites. And I've been inspired by Dan Myers and others to just take lots of images of things, pictures of drain pipes. And I apologize for any banging you're hearing in the background. I'm having work done on my house. And I've submitted some images, but I've never seen them there. So if you ever see them, tag me. But I'm not sure how active they are with this site. But so I just take pictures everywhere I go. This was at one of the ed camps that Fran and I facilitated, and our colleague and friend from the Agency of Education, Tanya, this was her lunch. She literally sat down next to me and kind of folded her paper towel and then set out each cracker. And before she ate anything, I'm like, Tanya, can I take a picture of your lunch? And she thought I was a little strange, I think. But just think of the math here, just from this picture of this person's lunch. You know, I did not set this up. I did not ask her to do this. She just did this next to me. And we all have these little mini cameras and computers in our pockets. So, you know, take pictures of things that are meaningful to you, meaningful to your students. I also think using books like Greg Tang's, we already looked at the snails, but he has this Grapes of Math. You know, each of his images have these little jingles. So strolling along a vineyard path, and there I see the Grapes of Math. You know, you don't have enough time to count each one. So how could you match them up? And looking at the groups of purple and green together makes a group of 10, right? And once you do that, it makes it really easy to count how many grapes are there. But if you try to count each one, that's gonna be hard. And then there's the fish one, which I love. And my favorite thing here is when students kind of turn their head cockeyed and kind of see then the array easier. When you turn it cockeyed, of course, the colors are trying to kind of draw your attention off of that. So again, lots and lots of different ways to see this, lots of ways to combine. You can see the triangle of 6 on the top and the triangle of 6 on the bottom, and then the 4 in the middle. So just lots of mileage you can get out of these images. I think you could share this with kindergartners, and you could share it with 4th and 5th graders and still get great mileage out of it. And then this, I have to plug my book that's coming out. So we tried to write in like number sense routines into that. And this is one of the books in 3rd grade that I worked on. And it's about, if you've never heard it, Mango Abuela and Me. Mango is the parrot. And this girl's grandmother comes from another country and doesn't speak English. And so they have a little hard time, but through cooking and doing other things, they learn to develop a relationship. And the grandmother learned some English, and she learned some Spanish, the little girl. And so one of the things they do is cook with eggs. So I took this image of eggs and did a little kind of number sense routine or a number talk with 3rd graders at a school here in Burlington. And this is a picture of their work. And again, this was early in the year. This was maybe October a year ago. And unfortunately, this image didn't make it into the book because Sue O'Connell felt like the division wasn't appropriate for 3rd grade early on. But they brought it to, like, I didn't prompt that. They just brought it to when I was asking about noticing and wondering and things they observed. Someone said, well, you could divide 12 by 2 and get 2 groups of 6. So I thought that was pretty cool that 3rd graders were thinking that way. Some other resources for visuals, Steve Wyborny's Splat is a great one if you're not familiar with it. And so Splat he has lots of different like PowerPoints you can download already pre-made. So there's 14 here, how many are hiding under the kind of spilled Splat. And then same or different is another great one. And what I love about this is you can look at things like the commutative property. And so when we say that 4 times 5 is the same as 5 times 4, that's actually not true. 4 times 5 has the same value. And what's the value here? The value is the number of balls, but they're actually different things. First of all, because they're different types of balls, but also in their arrangement, that's actually a different thing. And so if we're talking about people, or if we're talking about pieces, then that's going to have a difference. Or maybe if they're candies, different flavors, like I might want one that has fewer of a flavor I don't like. So that context that it brings. And then I want to share some exciting news. Fran, Sandy, and Aaron, if you know those folks, and I have been working on a launch series, and that's started. So sign up if you haven't already. And we're creating a web page that will be right there on the All Learners website. It's not there yet, although someone emailed me yesterday and somehow they saw it when Natasha was previewing it with me, and they were all bummed that it went down. So this should be coming out in the next about month, and we'll have a whole web page about number sense routines, and a lot of those will be images. And we hope to create a space where other people, if you all had images you wanted to share and put up, that we'll have a kind of a spot to do that. So I'm really excited about that as well. Great, the last thing I want to talk about today is anticipating. And really thinking about, again, taking those 3 deep breaths and how do we just get more out of less? How do we as teachers get more mileage out of fewer things? So we have fewer things to correct, we have fewer things to prepare, but the things that we're preparing are really high quality, and students can go deep with them. So this comes from the 5 practices, which is Kay Smith and Peg Smith and Mary Kay Stein. And this is Peg Smith at an NCTM conference when she was presenting, and I forced her to take a picture with me. You can tell she's a little like, who's this strange bald man? But this changed my teaching practices when it first came out back around 2010. And so really, when we think about teaching, the only way that we can give good questions is when we are prepared to do so, and we've kind of done some pre-planning and pre-thinking. Otherwise, it's really hard to ask good questions. So if you're not familiar with the 5 practices, we're not going to focus on all of them, but they're anticipating, monitoring, selecting, sequencing, and then connecting. And all of this could be done with just one problem. So in a nutshell, the purpose of the 5 practices is to really make this more manageable for us as teachers. So when we're in kind of the throes of teaching, and we're trying to think of who to call on and what question to ask and how to organize the students and how to group them, that we free up our mental capacity to do those things that are in the moment, because we've done so much thinking prior to the lesson. And so that improvisation is less intense for us during a discussion. So there's the anticipating. So the very first thing you want to think of is do the actual problem yourself. Right? And I know this is not realistic to do for every problem you have, but if you do this on a regular basis and make it a habit, then actually it becomes just part of what you do, and you start thinking that way and thinking about what are students likely to do with this problem? What do I think I'm going to get from them? What do I hope, like what would have me whistling Dixie, skipping down the hall if my students did this? Because that will help me frame and think about questions or prompts I might use to have students consider. And then also we want to think about potential misconceptions, because we want to be aware of those and address those in an appropriate way if they arise. And in a nutshell, it's you are the conductor of your own math symphony. And I love this analogy of when we're facilitating discourse and discussion in our classrooms, that it's really like a symphony, because we're trying to get all these different sounds to blend together and to connect and make sense of all of that. So there's an anticipation guide, which I'm going to share with you. And I created this at one point, and then I've been to sessions with Graham Fletcher and others where they've created something similar, and I changed mine based on what I saw from Graham Fletcher. But the way I've used this with teachers, and I've used this in lots of like lesson studies and coaching cycles with individual teachers or whole groups of teachers, is we pick a problem or something, a task from a session or maybe a Bridges lesson, and we think about, we're going to think really deeply about this one. So if you are familiar with Bridges, this would be like a math forum, right? You'd be thinking about, how do I share the student thinking? So this would kind of lend itself to a math forum. Or a Congress, if you're familiar with Kathy Fosno's work. So I always like to start with just what misconceptions might happen. And often folks are a little confused between what's a misconception and what's an error. And I think it is a blurry line, but I always think of misconceptions as like big red flags, whereas errors are kind of like small little mistakes, computation errors that might lead a student to an incorrect answer, but won't necessarily, it doesn't show faulty thinking. So there is a difference between those two things. And then I like to think of what's the most concrete, accessible way that students most likely will solve this problem. So, and be able to get a correct answer, right? It might not be a super efficient strategy. It may be for that student, but it's a concrete way that actually gets you to the solution. And I call it bookending. So I like to then go down and think of the last one, like what would be that thing I'm skipping down the hallway after, whistling and sharing with my colleagues because my students did this thing and I was just so excited and they blew my socks off. What is it that they would do? It's probably the least accessible or the most abstract strategy. And then in between, you have this mishmash of things that happen. And there's no right or wrong way to sequence this, but by sequencing prior to actually being in your classroom, it really takes away that have to in your brain of having to think of how do I sequence student thinking when we get to the discussion. And I always like to leave at least a couple blanks in there because inevitably someone does something during a class that I hadn't thought of. Right? So I have a space to put it and kind of make sense of where it is. If I'm using this form without doing any of this pre-thinking, then I really need that order on the side because I could have strategies kind of intermingled throughout this form. That is one way to use it. But if I'm using it where I've pre-planned and I've thought through most of the strategies and left a couple blanks for those I might not think of, then I don't really necessarily need that order column because they'll kind of go from top to bottom, right? Then I'm just making decisions. Am I sharing a misconception, or are we starting with a misconception or error? Because a lot of kids did that. Or am I starting at concrete and moving towards that more abstract? So I have a problem I want you to think about. We're not going to share or talk about it here. You're going to think about this problem. Think about how maybe students in 4th or 5th grade, I guess 12ths would make it more of like a 5th grade level, how they would interact with this. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, and I want you to actually in your group talk about the problem. What do you notice? What do you wonder? How do you think students would solve it? But kind of walk through and think about how to fill out one of these forms based on that. What might be some strategies you'd see from a concrete to a more abstract? Great, I think everyone's back. So we don't have a ton of time, so but in one of the groups there was a great comment, and I know Fran, you said you'd be willing to share your thoughts that you all were talking about.
Yeah, I think it was the abstract comment you were talking about, TJ,
Mhm.
that we thought that an abstract strategy might be a student who sees that both are correct and who can move back and forth between both solutions being solutions that work for this design. And
Yeah.
that would be on the abstract level, whereas a developing understanding might be a student who can only see it one way and is not yet able to see how the other solution is correct as well.
Great. And I loved how you're using the term developing understanding versus like misconception. So
Yeah,
that's something I want to kind of adopt into my language as well.
yep.
There are two great articles that NCTM has published kind of about selecting and sequencing, about orchestrating discussions. So if you haven't seen them, they're really great follow-up, and Isaac's going to pop those links into the chat there. I PDF those in a Google Doc, so you can have access to those. And just with our last couple minutes, I'd love if in the chat you could populate just some takeaways from this session, anything that you can implement right away. Most of you, if not all of you, will be in classrooms starting tomorrow. So what is it you can take from today? Thanks, Sherry. Yeah, I love that. Sue O'Connell calls that focus on the question. I love that strategy. Yeah, thanks, Janet. You can do that with any program, any materials, just remove the question, really opens it up. Great, Cheryl asking more questions, love it. Yeah, and make those notice and wonders part of your kind of repertoire. So there again is the how you get the presentation if you didn't get it, and also, I think Isaac, you can, if you don't mind dropping in the from the last page, I think there's a link for the conference resource. And thank you all so much for spending your time. I appreciate it, and I hope everyone stays safe and healthy out there. Appreciate your time.